Hey, what's happening, guys? What's going on YouTube? You guys have tuned into Rules for Rebels. And today we're going to be talking about streaming services. I thought this was an interesting business story, an interesting business news story. And also, if you guys are invested in streaming services, this is probably something you should be aware of and something that may change your investment horizon for investing in streaming services like Netflix, or even, companies like Apple TV, Disney Plus, etc. I just saw this article. It's titled UK Households Cancel Streaming Services in Record Numbers as Inflation Forces Cutbacks. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about this in today's video. And before we start today's video, I would be really curious to hear from you guys. How many streaming services are you signed up for? Are you just signed up for one, just Netflix? Or do you have like 3 or 4? Are you Netflix and Disney Plus and, Amazon Prime, which has their own video, and Hulu and, whatever other service? It's kind of funny. Probably in the past 10 or 12 years, there was this big move where everybody, quote unquote, cut the cord, right? Everybody ditched their cable subscriptions or cable services for streaming services like Netflix. And way back when it first started, it made a lot of sense, right? Cable is not cheap. Cable's normally, normally gets bundled with a phone and internet package, a Comcast triple play or whatever service you have in your area. But, cable will run you $150, $200 a month when you wind up buying the package. And way back when streaming services were first getting started, Netflix was $7.99 a month. So it was kind of a no-brainer that I can ditch my $150, $200 a month cable package, pay Netflix $7.99, and have all the shows that I could ever want to watch. Well, obviously, more competition has come into the space. A lot of us have signed up for more and more streaming programs. And, next thing you know, I'm signed up for 5, 6, 7, 8 different streaming programs. The cost of these streaming services has also gone up. It's no longer $5.99 a month for Hulu, $7.99 a month for Amazon. I think now my Netflix is $14.99. Now my Hulu went from $5.99 to $14.99. I think at one point, the only reason I signed up for Hulu is because at one point I had Sprint phone service and they gave me a free Hulu subscription. But after I moved away from Sprint, I still wound up keeping the Hulu. And all of a sudden, it's like, I'm not really saving that much money when I'm paying $15 a month for 5, 6, 7, 8 different services. And then another thing, you have companies like Disney and others, but particularly Disney, who's really kind of getting involved in politics. There's this, I hate calling it the Don't Say Gay bill because nowhere in the bill does it say don't say gay. But in Florida, we have what's been coined through clever marketing from those against it, the quote unquote Don't Say Gay bill. Now, what the Don't Say Gay bill actually says is that you can't teach 4 to 7-year-olds about sex in schools. And parents have a right to know what's being taught to their kids in schools. This has been turned into the quote-unquote Don't Say Gay bill. Disney has really gotten themselves involved in this story, in this political issue. And I think Disney also made a statement recently saying something to the effect of 50% of the characters in their shows and movies are now going to be either gay or transgendered. I forget if it's like also people of color as well, but I know at the very least it's gay and transgendered. What's kind of crazy about this, transgendered people make up less than half of a 0.5% of the population, yet you're going to feature 50% of your characters as transgendered people. I'm not against transgendered people having themselves portrayed or having a presence in television and movies and entertainment. But when you take a group that in the population represents less than a 0.5% and make them 50% of your characters, that kind of goes away from just having representation to kind of pushing an agenda. And I think that's also turning a lot of people off. Patrick Bet David had an interesting guest on the other day. I don't know if you guys watch his Valuetainment podcast at all. I forget the guy. It's the actor who used to be a really, really heavyset guy. I want to say it's the guy from Jay and Silent Bob. I could be mistaken, maybe mixing them up. But he was on the show, and they kind of got to talking about how, you remember years ago how Disney used to hide dicks and balls and sexual things in their movies? Like, I believe on the cover of The Little Mermaid, there's like a dick and balls right there. I believe the priest in The Little Mermaid also had a boner. That's something funny. We all kind of laughed about it when we were younger. But it kind of makes you think, this company who really wants teachers to be able to talk to 4-year-olds about sex and gender and transgenderism, is also a company that was putting dicks in front of your kids through the movies that they make, and the whole thing just kind of seemed kind of weird. And I think that's actually probably going to turn off a lot of parents and really maybe just a lot of sane, normal people from supporting a company like Disney. Let's get into this article. UK households cancel streaming subscriptions in record numbers as inflation forces cutbacks. I think another thing kind of affecting this, for the last 2 years, we were locked in our homes. There was really nothing to do but watch Netflix and Disney Plus and all these streaming services. Yesterday, the mask mandate on airplanes was removed. I think that was kind of the final straw. I think we can finally say we're done with COVID. No, COVID hasn't gone away. It's something that we're going to live with. It's going to be like the common cold or the flu. But the idea that we're in the midst of a pandemic, I think officially ended yesterday. If it hadn't ended already. But I think the mass on planes was the last thing to go to where, okay, life is finally back to normal. I think the one thing we got left to get rid of is testing when people come from another country into our country. It's kind of funny. I actually had two buddies of mine recently went over to Europe for St. Patrick's Day. Just was supposed to be a short 4-day kind of long weekend trip. One of them tested positive for COVID at the airport on the way back and wound up having to stay for an extra 8 days. But I believe we are the only country left that makes you take a test before you return home from a trip out of the country. I'd be curious to see how much of this is people upset with companies like Disney, how much of this is truly related to inflation. I mean, is saving $15 a month on your Netflix bill really going to help you out that much? $15 doesn't go that far anymore. Although, I guess if you make a habit of getting rid of services that you don't need or use, Netflix on its own is only $15. But if you cancel your Hulu and you cancel your Disney Plus and you cancel 2 or 3 other streaming services that you have, I guess that could add up to a fairly substantial amount of money. On kind of a unrelated but related note, I saw another article. This article was titled The Monopoly on Your Mind. These 6 companies control what you read, watch, and hear. And I thought this was kind of interesting. Years ago, there were kind of like broadcast rules that one major corporation kind of can't take over all media. But today, companies like Comcast, Disney, AT&T, Sony, Fox, and Paramount control 90% of what you read, watch, or listen to. And not only do these media conglomerates own all these different companies, but even if they're not directly owned by the same people, you have the same guy who sits on the board at Disney, also sits on the board at AT&T, and also sits on the board of Fox. And so there's kind of a conflict of interest there. I thought that was kind of somewhat related when we're talking about media here. But let's get into this article. Here's some more bad news for Netflix, Apple TV, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, and the various and sundry streaming competitors, including the already struggling CNN Plus. In the face of a worsening inflation crunch, consumers are canceling their streaming services at a record pace. According to the FT, which cited figures from analytics organization Kantar, British households walked away from about 1.5 million video-on-demand accounts during the first 3 months of the year, an unprecedented number suggesting that consumers are becoming more discerning. To be sure, 58% of households retain at least one streaming service, a decline of only 1.3% from the end of 2021, but the determination suggests that viewers have become more discerning about subscribing to multiple platforms. And I can definitely say that's kind of true of me. I haven't really done it yet, but one thing I was planning on doing, I don't watch most of the streaming services that I subscribe to. So I was going to, if I'm currently subscribed to 4 streaming services, I was going to cancel 3 of them, maybe stick with Netflix for 3 months. After the course of 3 months, I'm probably going to watch most of what interests me on Netflix. At that point, I'll cancel Netflix, sign up for Hulu. I'll do that for 3 months. Once I kind of exhaust everything that interests me on Hulu, I'll cancel that, move on to the next service. But there's really no reason to be subscribed to 4 different services, most of which, I don't wind up watching in the first place. Most of those canceling their subscriptions cited a desire to save money as the most important reason for canceling their subscriptions, and young adults have become particularly wary of paying for television on top of an annual $159 licensing fee. The Global Insight Director from Kantar described the streaming cancellation figures as sobering. The findings were sobering for streaming providers, said Dominic Sanebo, Global Insight Director at Kantar. He said streaming services had to prove their worth to consumers in what has become a heavily competitive market. That's another thing, right? Like, it kind of started off as just Netflix, but there's been so many competitors to the streaming space that they do have more companies to compete with. As we noted earlier this month, living standards in the UK are declining at a rate that's the fastest in 8 years due to a death spiral spurred by soaring energy costs. As a result, high inflation has pushed the UK Misery Index, an economic indicator to gauge how the average person is doing, to 3-decade highs. Of course, for investors, fears about oversaturation in the hyper-competitive streaming space have caused shares of once dominant Netflix to shed more than 40% of their valuation since the start of the year after reporting its worst quarter in half a decade. Netflix, which recently implemented its second round of UK price increases within 18 months, started raising monthly subscriptions from £10, which was about $13, to £11, which is $14.30. Circling back to the UK, Kantar's data showed BritBox, Apple TV Plus, and Discovery Plus had the highest churn rate, meaning they lost the most users on a gross basis. Disney Plus had the biggest increase in its churn rate, Kantar said. Its quarterly churn rate tripled from the previous quarter to 12%. Meanwhile, Netflix and Amazon Prime enjoyed the lowest churn rates, suggesting that users would cut them last during a period of belt tightening. And, I was just kind of looking at, like, the stock chart for Netflix. Obviously, we're kind of at the precipice of what's likely going to be a recession. Pretty much the stock market as a whole is down, so we can't necessarily blame all of this on all of this decline in stock price on people leaving streaming services. But if you look at Netflix, the year-to-date chart, which, I'm looking here, like January 3rd, Netflix was at $597. It's currently sitting at $337.86, down 43.44% on the year. Hop over here to look at the Disney stock chart. If we look at kind of the beginning of the year, okay. I guess we'll go back to like April 19th of 2021. Disney was sitting at $187.43. Right now, Disney is at, we weren't looking at the year-to-date chart, that's why. So if we go back to the year-to-date chart, basically back on January 3rd, Disney was at $156.76. Currently, Disney is sitting at $127.77. That's a decline of 18.49%. So yeah, I guess people are leaving streaming services. One thing that I actually think will be pretty interesting, I was talking to my buddy Jay Capola the other day. You guys might know him from this channel. He brokers businesses or sells businesses. And he was kind of telling me about some of the businesses that he's selling and what he's seeing in businesses. And one thing that I thought would be really interesting is what businesses are no longer really viable after COVID. Like what industries, what businesses, what ways of running a business are kind of antiquated or are no longer going to work post-COVID. Also, what businesses are now even more profitable post-COVID now that, we have this quote-unquote new normal. Have things changed at all? But this kind of got me thinking about that because, during COVID, a lot of us were signing up for more streaming services because we were at home a lot. We were bored. I know a lot of streaming services were having really good deals. My girlfriend signed up for like HBO and Starz because it was, get 3 months for $7.99. But it's really interesting to me to see what businesses are thriving post-COVID, what businesses are dead post-COVID. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, but one of my guilty pleasures is watching 90 Day Fiancé. And they just put out a new season of that. One of the girls on 90 Day Fiancé has a business, and I thought this might be interesting to you guys who are interested in side hustles and things like that. She has a business where she makes basically like balloon arches and things like that for birthday parties and events. And I thought it was kind of funny that I saw this because just about 2 weeks ago, my girlfriend's brother had a big party for his daughter's first birthday. And his wife, she's really creative. She likes kind of, going all out for birthdays and things like that. And they wound up paying somebody like $350, $400 to basically make like a balloon arch that people could take pictures in front of. And it kind of jumped out at me. It's like, that's kind of an interesting business idea. All they're doing is taking balloons, tying them together, and making a couple $100. But this girl on 90 Day Fiance had a business doing the same thing, and she had kind of alluded to, post-COVID, that business was kind of slowing down. During COVID, when people couldn't celebrate, you couldn't, have your kids' friends over for their birthday or something like that. So maybe you get them a big balloon arch and they can take a picture in front of it, and that's one way of kind of making their birthday special, even though you can't take them to Chuck E. Cheese or wherever else. And so I thought it would be interesting, how many businesses that popped up during the pandemic and filled a need when we were all locked inside are maybe no longer as attractive or no longer as relevant today. But that's all I got for you guys. We're going to cut this video short here. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to the channel, click that subscribe button down below. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next video.